This is the representation of the kind of quality of speakers that we have here at West Hawaii Forum. And we put these monthly forums on to provide as much civic involvement and education on issues that are important to you, the community. We are one island. We are one community.
Aloha, good evening everybody. Some people are still coming in. My name is Jane Clement. I am the president of Community Forums. I want to welcome you all to our West Hawaii Forum series. If you have been following our forums, if you've been here before, thank you very much for your continued support. I see some familiar faces here, and I also see a lot of new faces. So if this is your first time attending our forums, welcome. We are an all-volunteer nonprofit organization. We get our funding mostly from our county council members, Karen Eoff, Miley David, Rebecca Villegas, and Tim Richards. Those are our four council members here in West Hawaii, and they do help us fund our forums. And if you are not familiar with us, I'd like to invite you to check out our website, westhawaiiforums.org. All of our past forums, information on our past forums, including videos, full videos of our forums are on our website. And we cover topics from education to healthcare to energy, homelessness, various topics that are of importance to our community. So our mission really is to bring educational resources to our residents so we can all be better informed. I'd like to introduce you to our board members who are here. There's actually 7 board members of community forums, and they're very hardworking, and 3 of them are literally working tonight. Our audio guy, Scott Ordway, from Naleo TV. Our cameraman behind you is Isaiah Heyer from West Hawaii Community Health Center. And our moderator tonight is Ms. Candee Ellsworth. She is the Executive Director of Friends of Nelha. And with that, I would like to welcome our moderator, Candee Ellsworth.
Welcome, everybody. So, welcome tonight to our community forum, which is dedicated to the little fire ant. So my name is Candee Ellsworth, as Jane said, and I actually started my career out as an entomologist. So biologists and ants are amazing, and biologists love them because there's such a variety around the world, and the father of conservation biology was E.O. Wilson. He started out his career working with ants, and they are wonderful, but they are not native to Hawaii, so they pose a lot of problems here on the island, and the one species that poses the biggest risk is the little fire ant, so we're going to discuss that tonight. The first hour of the forum will be from our panelists, and we have Franny Brewer and Kiyoshi and Heather Forrester will be our panelists tonight, and the first hour will be dedicated to their presentations, and in the second hour, we'll take community questions that came from the community, whether they submitted those online or you guys have a note card already in the audience. And if you don't, there are some back there in the back table. Make sure you sign in so that we can get your email address and add you to our list so that you can get email blasts about further community forums. And I'd like to introduce Nicole Lowen, who is our state representative for District 6. And she is on the Energy and Environmental Protection Committee. Judiciary Committee and the Water, Land, and Hawaiian Affairs Committee, and she has been instrumental in securing funding for us to have an Ant Lab, the Hawaii Ant Lab here in Kona. And with that, I'll let her, she has a few words to say.
Thanks, I'll use the mic because I'm a little soft-spoken. But yeah, I was just asked to say a few quick introductory words. So again, I'm Nicole Lowen, I represent District 6. I chair the House Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection. And so, of course, thinking about invasive species is part of that, and it's something that I've worked on throughout my time in the state legislature. Also, thank you to these guys for being here, and Jane and Candee and the other board members, Scott, for their help. I guess everyone who's here is probably really aware that little fire ants are a huge threat to Hawaii, to our homes, to tourism, to our economy, to agriculture. And I think the message, if I have one message I want everyone to take away from here, I mean, you guys are here, so you've probably either already experienced them or you're aware of their existence or that it's something you should worry about and learn about. We need you guys to leave here today and go spread the word with your friends, your family, your coworkers, because we really need everybody to be vigilant about this problem if we're gonna, keep a handle on it. So everyone should be testing regularly, learning about what they should do. And these guys are here tonight to teach us how to do that. I did help get the funding that brought Kiyoshi to his job at the Hawaii Ant Lab. So Hawaii Ant Lab now has an office in West Hawaii. I think he's been doing a great job, and I know he's been really busy. So we're hoping to try to expand that in the future and get more people over here as well. And then, Franny's with Invasive Species, Big Island Invasive Species Committee, and Heather's also with Hawaii Ant Lab, I think usually based in Hilo. So these guys recognize the importance of this problem, have made the time to come over here tonight, and so they deserve a big mahalo as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. So we'll start out tonight with Heather Forrester, is with the Extension Specialist at the Hawaii Ant Lab in Hilo office. She's been with the lab for over 6 years, where she's worked with a variety of stakeholder groups throughout the state. One of her main focuses has been the prevention and early detection of West Hawaii and working with residents, farmers, and nurseries on best management practices for little fire ants. Since infested properties are faced with unique challenges, the Hawaii Ant Lab tailors specialized integrated pest management techniques and approaches based on the stakeholders' priorities and goals. And you can find that address on our website and her email address as well if you have further questions. And with that, I will let her take over. Welcome, Heather. Thank you.
So I want to start off by saying that October throughout the state is Spot the Ant, Stop the Ant month. Though here on Big Island, we all know every month is Spot the Ant, Stop the Ant month. So who the hell is Hal anyways? The Hawaii Ant Lab has the mission to protect Hawaii from the introduction, whether it be intentional or unintentional, introduction of invasive ants. And we do so through surveys at ports of entry. We also look to prevent the inter and intra-island spread of little fire ants. But primarily what we're working on is providing sound treatment advice. Pesticide safety is very important to us at the lab. Whenever possible, we look to eradicate populations of little fire ants. Though on the Big Island, we don't like to use the E word. We looked more to management. At the Hawaii Ant Lab, we are working statewide, so we collaborate with neighbor island ISCs, invasive species committees, as well as the Department of Agriculture on the other islands to really contain these other infestations that are popping up. And that might seem unfair sometimes for us Big Island residents. Why isn't someone coming to our backyard? Unfortunately, the little fire ants are so widespread on this island that at this point we're looking at management, and we do have the most staff here on Big Island to help you with your problems. So within the Hawaii Ant Lab, we look at doing research, operations, so that's surveys and treatments, as well as extension. What extension work does is it bridges the gap between our research and practical use. In Hilo, there's myself and Allison Wagner. And then fortunately, thanks to Rep. Lowen, we now have the West Side office. So Kiyoshi Adachi is our Kailua representative. And he provides services. You can come drop your samples off or mail them in. He can talk story with you. We're looking to start up monthly ant management clinics here on the west side. We're currently running them in Hilo, but the demand is so great now that we need to start that up here as well. The Hawaii Ant Lab has a website, littlefireants.com. On this website, you can find a ton of information, probably more than you ever wanted to know about invasive ants. All of our fact sheets are available online. And if you're not hooked up online, we can always mail you hard copies as well. There are videos on how to survey for little fire ants, how to mix up the Hawaii Ant Lab gel bait, which we'll talk about more later, as well as some other guides that help to debunk some of the misconceptions out there. I'm sure all of you have probably heard from a neighbor or a friend, this is how you kill little fire ants. Well, I just hope that you guys turn to either the Hawaii Ant Lab or the Big Island Invasive Species Committee for your treatment advice because of all those misconceptions floating around. Next, please. So let's get into a little bit of biology about ants. First of all, Hawaii has over 60 species of ants, none of which are native. And of those, there are a couple of species of, quote, fire ants that we have here. On the left-hand side, the tropical fire ant is an ant that we've had for quite some time. These ants will form mounds, and when disturbed, run up your leg and sting you, causing painful welts. Whereas the little fire ant is a lot smaller. And these ants will live on the ground as well as up in the trees. They're not excavating mounds. People are likely coming in contact with them or being stung by them when they're picking fruit from the tree or you brush against some landscape. They get stuck in your collar or a fold of skin, and when they become trapped, they're alarmed and they'll sting you out of defense. The ant on the right-hand side, fortunately, the red imported fire ant, we do not have in Hawaii, and we definitely don't want it. This is a big problem in Texas and the South. These are also a mounding species, and when disturbed, run up your legs or run up cattle's legs and sting them all at once and cause pustule welts. So one of the things at the Hawaii Ant Lab that we're doing at the ports of entry is early detection for this species in particular. Because all of these ants have different behaviors, like when you go fishing, you want to have the right hook and the right bait to catch the fish you want. The same thing goes for ants. Some ants are sugar loving, some ants are fat loving, some ants are protein loving. With the little fire ant, we find that they're very oil loving ants. So getting into little fire ants, they were first detected in Lower Puna in 1999. These ants love our tropical rainforest climate on the east side because they're native to Central and South America. It may be frustrating to think, why didn't something happen back in '99? I'd like to say that at that time, the only options available for treatment of these species were for those ants that are on the ground, these granular baits that you could put out. But the problem with little fire ants is they're three-dimensional. So if you're not treating the ants in the trees, those ants can live in the trees their entire life, and they won't necessarily come down to the ground to feed off of the bait that you've given. So eventually, when their population grows, they'll reinfest the ground. Also, when you have a newly introduced invasive species, people don't know what it is. These ants are so small and cryptic, and it's just an ant, right? That might have been what we thought back then, but we all know now that little fire ants are not just another ant. Little fire ants are about as long as a penny is thick, relatively slow moving and reddish orange in color. They'll nest in shady, moist areas. They don't excavate nests, they move into ready-made homes. You can pull back a patch of moss on a tree and find an entire colony in that area. One colony of little fire ants can fit inside of the size of a macadamia nutshell. Within that macadamia nutshell, you're going to have half a dozen queens, and they're all working together. This is part of the reason that they're so invasive. They're not fighting for territory and resources. All of these colonies spread throughout your yard are going to be working together. When people ask how quickly do little fire ants spread, I like to say 45 miles an hour in the back of your truck. It's really us that's spreading them around. They're hitchhiker ants, so they can catch a ride in potted plants, landscape material, mulch, cinder. We've seen it on roofing tiles as well. In order to transport a colony, though, you do need a fertile queen and several workers for that to start up. The workers themselves are not going to morph into a queen. They remain workers their entire lives. But the way that they do spread naturally is through what's called budding. So when that colony has reached capacity, a queen and several workers will branch off, start up another colony nearby, and continue to work together. Little fire ants are a pest to humans and our pets. They're stinging us similar to a wasp would with their rear end, and one ant can sting multiple times. So this is just really changing our quality of life and what we're able to do. You know, imagine going out hunting and getting rained on by little fire ants, or even going to the beach park. They're also stinging pets in the eyes, and that's a real tearjerker for a lot of people. So the ants will get into the eyes of your pets, and because the pets cannot get them out, they're repeatedly stung, and over time that can cause a clouding of the cornea called keratopathy, which can lead to blindness. Little fire ants are also a pest to agriculture. One of the things that we focus on at the Hawaii Ant Lab Extension is working with our farmers. Little fire ants are farming homopteran insects, things like aphids, scale, mealybugs, and feeding off of a sweet honeydew nectar that they produce. The little fire ants farm these like we would cattle, protect them, move them around, and in turn that causes a secondary impact of black sooty mold, and that black sooty mold can cause some crop damage and crop loss. You can also just get fruit spoilage or stunted growth. One of the major impacts, though, is that when you have an infested farm, you're going to have a hard time finding your workers, because no matter how much you're paying them, they're not going to want to come back if they're continually getting stung. There's added pest control costs, and so if you can imagine treating your 10,000 square foot lot, you know, imagine timesing that times acres and acres for these farmers. So rather than looking at killing an ant, you know, it's always a good gratification if you get to just stomp on a bug or squish it right there. But with little fire ants, we really have to look at killing the entire colony. It's one super organism. So within the colony, you're going to have multiple queens. Once they've mated successfully one time, they're fertile for life. So keep that in mind. You know, the goal is to kill the queen. The males are only around for a short amount of time. That's to mate, and then they die. Sorry. All the workers, those small ants that are out and about stinging us, those are all females. So these are social insects similar to what you would see in bees. Those worker ants go out. The ones that you see, though, are only about 10 to 14% of the colony. They're going out, feeding off of the liquid food source, storing it in their crop, like a chicken has a crop, taking it back to the colony, regurgitating it, and sharing it with the other workers, as well as the queen. There's also larvae back at the colony. So that's a little bit of the biology of little fire ants. Next, I'd like to talk about survey methodology. So there have been some samples that came in today, and 4 out of 4 of them were positive for little fire ants. The first thing that I want to say about that is that don't be afraid to submit a sample. I know it can be hard, like going to the doctor. You don't really want to know what your blood pressure is all the time or some of your levels, but going in to check and catching it early is going to be your best bet. If you submit a sample and find out it's little fire ants, it doesn't mean you're the first person that brought it in to the community. It just means that you're the first person that's responsible enough to report it. So the way to survey is to take a chopstick, coffee stirrer stick, any type of wooden stick will do. These kits have nicely bright painted sticks. You put a thin layer of creamy peanut butter, not too thick because the ants can get buried in there and it makes it harder for us to find. So just a thin layer, place them with the peanut butter in contact with the surface that you're going to survey. Don't jab it into the ground because then it's like a flagpole. You don't have circus ants, I don't think so. Lay it flat on the ground, think about up in the crotch of trees where the ants might find it. Wait 45 minutes to an hour. Collect your sticks and bag them. Once they're in the bag, freeze them and that will kill the ants. We ask that you freeze them for 24 hours. And you can either mail them in to the Hawaii Ant Lab or Big Island Invasive Species Committee, and we'll identify those for you free of charge. At the Hawaii Ant Lab, we offer ant identification for any problematic ant, and then we can also work with you on treatment options for those as well. So this slide is just the address. We have an address in Hilo, as well as in Kainaliu at the CTAR Extension Building. And Franny hopefully later will share the information about where her office is located for those samples. Once we get the ants into the lab, we look for several main features. On the antenna, there's going to be 2 large segments. That's called the antennal club. On some ants, all of these segments are the same size, or you may have 3 large segments. They also have 2 spines, one on either side of their backs, that are quite long. They have what's called 2 petiole segments, and that connects the body to the rear end of the ant, a characteristic teardrop-shaped eyes, and an antennal scrobe. So that's your word of the day. The scrobe is on the forehead of the ant where the antennas can rest in. In Hawaii, we have several look-alike species, so to the naked eye, it is impossible to tell, even for us who have worked there for many years. We always are looking at it under the microscope to get a positive identification. Of those 60 species we talked about, 30 of them are capable of stinging us, 10 of them are likely, and of that 10, the little fire ant is one. So just because you're getting stung doesn't mean it's a fire ant. On the flip side, even if you're not getting stung, you might have little fire ants. And that's all for me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather. And I also have to say, you have the best last name for doing what you do. All right, well, next we have Kiyoshi Adachi. Kiyoshi is with the extension agent at Hawaii Ant Lab here in the Kona office. He has been with the lab for over 4 years, where he's been involved with a variety of operations and extension projects. He has a strong background in farming and landscaping, making him an invaluable member of this team. His position, he identifies ant samples, conducts farm visits, and works with stakeholders on best management practices. And you can find the address and his email address as well with our community forums information that will be available later on our webpage. And I will let him take the stage. Welcome, Kiyoshi.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I've always been the person in the field finding and killing these ants. So make sure you grab one of my cards, because when it comes down to managing them, I'm your huckleberry. So these are some IPM strategies where you can use to have a combined attack against LFA. You know, prevention, always great. Don't bring them to your house, if at all possible, unless you have a wife like mine who's always bringing home stuff from farmer's market and stuff like that. Sanitation is huge. The cleaner it is, the less homes they have. So in turn, you can actually have less numbers that way. And then also you have your chemical control. So as you can see, our goal is to provide the least toxic options for our aina, for our land and our seas, you know. We use really target-specific baits, so you're not killing things like, you know, ladybugs and honeybees and all of our good insects also. Next. If I give you a shock, you don't wanna. Okay. So as Heather mentioned, you know, we're the ones spreading the fire ants. You know, naturally they spread pretty slowly, but you definitely want to be aware of what you bring. You know, potted plants, soil, mulch, surveying, things like that. Like the way you can survey your property, you can actually survey things you bring home also. That can be a huge prevention for you guys with contaminating your own yard. Yeah, can go next. So as I said, minimizing their nesting habitats, keeping your place clean, less homes, less ants in that matter. We do work alongside with Hawaii Earth Products. If you guys are a fan of their mulch, we post our monthly surveys there. We survey their facilities once a month. So if any of you had fears about mulch, you can actually check out our website and see our survey results. But, you know, doing extra, you know, is always better. You know, doing your own survey of what you bring home, because it's never a guarantee that we find every single ant. So, yeah, next. So you have different tools for different jobs. As you can see up here, you have a mixture of baits and contacts. This is really important. I like to, you know, always explain like the contact and, you know, or residual barriers. I explain that like it's a lethal electric fence. So you can, if your neighbor has them and you don't, you can actually use like a barrier treatment to kind of keep them away. If you do have them, you probably want to go with baits. That's how you kill queens, is with baits. With contacts and barriers, you're basically killing off the foragers and possibly a traveling queen and her workers to start a new colony. But if you're only killing foragers with contacts and residual barriers, queens can actually start to produce workforce at a higher rate. So instead of, you know, maybe 4 to 8 a day, she can start cranking out 20 to 40 babies a day. And you can actually end up in a worse place than you started out with by just using contacts and residual barriers. Okay, next up. So barrier treatments around the house, your boundary lines, and that's also a good one too, is quarantine area, where it can come in handy. If you bring home something, you want to make sure it doesn't spread, you can use a barrier treatment to make your own quarantine area. If the ants try to run away from the potted plant, they won't make it. They'll hit that barrier treatment and die. So yeah, it's just a great note on that for you guys. Next. So granular baits for your ground treatment. The granular baits are corn grit, attractive to the ants. You can spread it around and get a good kill that way. You will kill queens with those. The granular baits are ready to use, so you don't have to mix it with anything. A lot of people think they got to mix the granular bait with peanut butter, but you're actually just feeding the ants more peanut butter. So the only downfall of the bait is moisture. When using granular baits, you want about 3 to 4 hours of dry weather. You want to start off dry and have about 3 to 4 hours after. The poison in it is so minuscule that any amount of moisture can dilute it or make it unattractive. Next. The gel matrix, a really important weapon for us here in Hawaii. Because these ants nest arboreally, we do want to treat trees. So that's when the gel matrix comes in handy. That one you have to mix on your own and squirt it up in the trees. And that's how you combat colonies up in the trees, is with that gel matrix. I run mixing demonstrations. We also have it on our website. Just another weapon to use in combating LFA. If you only treat the ground, the ones nesting in the trees will eventually repopulate the ground. So if you have LFA in your trees, you definitely want to be treating trees and ground. You really don't need to saturate your place with bait. You figure for granular baits, depending on what you use, a pound and a half can treat an entire acre. Yeah, and then for the gel, it's about 1 gallon or to 2 gallons per acre. You'd be at the 2 gallon mark if you're heavily forested. But in terms of, you really don't need to saturate your place with gel. We do have application demonstrations on our website to show you, but tiny little ants, we're not baiting for buffalo or anything like that. So a little bit goes a long way when treating for LFA. So, yep. Broadcasting your bait. This is all great tips for when you go out and start killing ants. Broadcasting your bait according to the label. When you broadcast evenly with those granular baits, every single granule turns into something that the ants can find. When you're using bait stations, they get one chance to find them. So broadcasting, if possible, is always the recommended way of treatment. You get so much better results that way if you can broadcast your bait. So as I said, that 4 hours or so on a dry day. And then when dealing with LFA, it's never a one-shot deal. They're so invasive. They have so many queens. You're going to want to reapply every 4 to 6 weeks. I personally have to treat my property, and I stay at the 6-week mark if I can. Less treatments per year, save you a little bit of time and money. And to me, I also get better results that way. More young foragers who have left the colony, and the bait looks really attractive to them. The only time I move up my treatments is if, expecting a tropical storm or something on week number 6, then I'll move it up. And constant surveying, if you can plan on surveying your place 2 to 4 times a year, It can tell you where to treat, where to take the fight to. You can see the results that you're getting off your treatment. It's another good part to integrate in your pest management plan is regular surveys if you can. So this is what I said about the broadcast versus bait stations. You just get way more consumption with the broadcast. But bait stations can come in handy to if you want to like hide it from something, or if you're treating near like a koi pond or something, then possibly a bait station can come in handy. Personally, I always like to broadcast. I get way better results that way. So. And this is a 12-month treatment plan, kind of important for you guys. You got a few options up there in terms of an insect growth regulator only, which is the Tango Gel Matrix. The good thing about the Tango is it does have a label for bearing crop. You can use it on your edibles. So that's where it comes in real handy for us here in Hawaii. We can treat our banana trees, our papayas, coffee, things like that with the Tango. With the Tango, you're not killing anything, because what Tango is, it's basically a hormone found in young insects. So when the queens ingest it, they think they're younger, and then they don't produce babies. So you actually get a decline in population because she's not replenishing her armies. But similar to a birth control, it can cycle out of her. So she does need that steady diet every 4 to 6 weeks for a Tango treatment to be effective. And a lot of people's favorite one is the toxic bait only. Pound them with granular bait and start killing them. So yeah, that can be a good one. And option C, insect growth regulator for 6 months, then toxic bait after. You can actually weaken the colony by using the growth regulator first, and then kind of give them the knockout blow with the toxic bait on the following 6 months. But as you can see, it's a yearly plan. It's not a one-shot deal. A lot of people will use a bait, see the results, and think that they're good, but it is a long-term type treatment with dealing with this invasive ant. Can go next. So as I said, it's never a one-shot deal. Be religious on your treatments. I always like to mark my calendar when my next treatment is coming up. That way I don't forget, It's really crucial to be religious on your treatments. Yep, and give me a call when you are ready to start killing. I mean, I can help you out with all of that stuff. So these are some of the things I can help you out with. The training, mixing and application demos, if you guys got to mix the gel matrix, management practices, and personalized treatment plans. Not everybody has edible crops. A lot of people have a lot of ornamentals, so we can always cater a treatment plan specifically for you. Give us a call, we'll ask you about your property, and come up with something that is going to be the most effective for you and your wallet and your time management, So it's always something that's really helped out a lot of people in the community, that personalized attack that we can create for you. Thank you, guys. A little bit sweaty.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to remind the audience, if you have questions as we go on, write them down on a note card. We have a pile of note cards in the back. If you need a pen, they're back there also. And you will have time to ask the panelists questions after they're finished. So we have one more panelist left, and that is Franny Brewer, the Communications Director for the Big Island Invasive Species Committee, also known as BIISC. And she is from the University of Hawaii program, which works with island-wide to address invasive species that affect our environment, economy, and health, and manages BIISC environmental education programs, informing and engaging residents about Ankeki to Kapuna to protect our forests, farms, reef, homes, and from damaging pests. She will be presenting the BIISC Little Fire Ant program, which provides hands-on training and support to neighborhoods and communities committed to working together to control little fire ants. So welcome, Franny.
Thank you. Hi. Okay. Hello. That's okay. I don't have to applaud yet. Wait till I tell you what I'm here for. Okay. So I'm from BIISC, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what BIISC is. So we are a project of the University of Hawaii, and we partner with a lot of different federal, state, county, nonprofit, community partners on various invasive species issues. So we work on rapid ohia death and some new emerging pest species and lots of plant species and lots of stuff. So little fire ants has been one of our biggest lately. But we started out coming out of the Big Island's approach to Myconia, trying to control Myconia, which started in the 90s, and sort of the state decision being made that Myconia was too far gone on Hawaii Island, and the estimate about 10 years ago was it would cost $20 million to eradicate Myconia from the island, and the state said, nah. So we have a team of botanists, and we work a lot on trying to identify plants that are coming in that are not yet big pests, and hopefully, if we do our job right, you'll never, ever hear about these pests because we will try to eradicate those plants now, not 20 or 30 or 40 years from now when they become a huge problem. So that's been a big part of what we've done over the last decade and a half. We got really involved in a widespread issue with albizia. So if anybody's familiar with Puna, during Iselle, we had literally thousands of trees come down overnight during Tropical Storm Iselle a few years back. And people were left without electricity in Puna for 3 weeks. Very scary, very dangerous situation. And so we really were getting involved, even before Iselle happened, we were getting involved with communities and working with utility companies and HDOT and the county to try and control albizia. To protect, for public safety, protect the roads, protect the power lines. And so we did a lot of work with the community. So what reason we were trying to get the community involved and get people, residents involved, is because invasive species don't know boundaries, right? They don't sort of walk up to the edge of state land and say, well, I'm not going to jump over onto somebody else's property. So we've really started to look at this model of having to integrate the various stakeholders into action. We work with utilities that sort of say, well, this is the right of way, and this is the only place that we have any right to do anything. Well, there's an albizia tree right here. So we're doing a lot of work of trying to cross those boundaries. And while we were out in the community, working with the community on absentee owner lots and just areas where there was albizia growing up that wasn't in the right of way or wasn't on public land. One of the things that came up a lot was little fire ants. And as you can see from this picture, when you're working in invasive species in Hawaii, in East Hawaii, you end up having to do a lot to protect yourself from little fire ants. So we kind of go head to toe in burqas when we're out there hitting the trees because it's a pretty miserable kind of thing. And people were really asking us, what are we going to do about this? So we are a 100% grant-funded program, so always have to kind of mention that thank you to our funders so that we will continue to get funding. But Hawaii Tourism Authority was the first entity to say, yeah, we'll fund an education program for little fire ants to bring it to the community. And I'll talk about why that might be in a second. But we were able to, once you get seed funding, you can sort of get other people to fund you. So we've gotten funding from the Invasive Species Council, Hawaii County Council, Change Happens, and we did some work with Stanford University, and the National Science Foundation funded that. Okay, so we have a definition for invasive species, and a lot of people think it's just anything that came in from anywhere else. Well, that's not the case. Most of our food crops came in from somewhere else. They're introduced. Things that were brought in by humans are introduced. They're not native species. But in order to be considered an invasive species, something has to be introduced, so it's not native to an area, and it has to cause harm in at least one of 3 areas: the economy, the environment, or human health. And that's the federal definition as put into law by President Clinton in the 1990s. Since then, Hawaii in the early 2000s adopted a similar definition, but they added way of life to reflect the unique cultural and lifestyle aspects of living here in Hawaii. Little fire ants impact all three areas: the economy, the environment, and certainly human health and way of life. And in fact, little fire ants are one of the world's 100 worst invasive species. So the IUCN put together a list of the top invaders. Hawaii has 50 out of 100. Okay, so what we see, and Heather talked about this, with the impacts to our environment, we do have a lot of species of introduced ants. We don't have native ants in Hawaii, and we already have problems with several species of ants in Hawaii. So for instance, we have a lot of endangered and threatened birds here. We have problems with ants attacking birds in the nests. So when you have marine birds that are nesting up in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, we have strike teams that go up before the bird breeding season to actually try and wipe the ant colonies down so that they can't attack the baby birds that are stuck in the nest. These are yellow crazy ants, which emit formic acid, so it causes the beaks and the legs of the birds to become malformed. There are big-headed ants, other ants that will actually bite them and cause them to bleed. So ants are already a serious problem. They're a threat to our yellow-faced bees, which are the first bees to be listed on the endangered species list, because these are solitary bees that nest in little nooks and crannies, and the ants will go in and they will actually destroy the eggs of this endangered species. So we consider ants in general, a lot of species of ants, to be a pretty big threat to Hawaii's native environment, and little fire ants are considered the worst that we have so far. Food security. We talk a lot about food security. A couple weeks ago, I was at the Hawaii Island Food Summit, which was amazing. So many people are really trying to improve the situation for food security on this island, but in 2015, there was a report that came out of Department of Economics, and that was with Cass from the Hawaii Ant Lab, and they predicted $1.6 billion in costs to our economy from little fire ants if we leave them unmanaged. $1.6 billion over the next 3 decades. Okay. They also projected sting events, and they said, okay, if we don't do anything about fire ants, 2.3 billion stings to humans. So there's 200,000 of us. So figure out how many stings are yours, and 1 billion stings to our pets. And as Heather talked about, that's a serious problem, right, with our animals getting that keratopathy. One thing that I really try to stress is this idea of peak ant. So in studies where they were looking at vegetated situations, like orchard situations, they found little fire ants can reach a density of 20,000 ants per square meter. So imagine just a little space, 30 to 70 queens inside that square meter. There's no way for you to find all those queens and get them, right? And people, I think, especially this is something that could be dangerous here on the west side. We don't see it so much on the east side anymore, but people will kind of say, well, I have them over there in that corner of my yard. Or I had a situation with a friend in Puna who had them in a bathroom, and she didn't tell me that before I used the bathroom, and that was not fun. So you have to tell people when you abandon a room to fire ants. But this is an issue where people think, well, I don't go in that corner, and she was willing to give up. They had another bathroom, so she just used the other bathroom. But they'll keep coming, right? They want to reach this density. They're going to be happy there. So we have a lot of people that maybe think it's not a problem yet, or it's not a big problem. I can handle it. I can deal with it. And as it started out earlier, and I think it was mentioned that all of you are going to have to go out there. I think Nicole said, right? Everyone here has to go out and be the people to talk to your neighbors and your friends and your coworkers, because that's peak ant, 20,000 ants per square meter. And that's the situation that we're afraid of getting to, and if we don't take action now, that's what they're looking to do. So we have a community education program. So what we do is we will come out to the community, and we launched this program in 2016, and the goal is to empower communities, and this is where we partnered with Stanford University on trying to figure out ways that we can get people to act. So we know, Kiyoshi detailed pretty well how do we treat ants, but how do we get the people to treat the ants is actually a different question. But we have started coming to communities. We'll come out and do a meeting in a carport, in a church, a yoga studio, a gym, under a tent. These are all places I have actually done presentations, sometimes with PowerPoint, sometimes with no electricity. But we try to get your community, someone in the community invites us out, and then we will come to you and talk about fire ants. And we try to be as flexible as possible to meet people's work schedules and, on weekends if needed, even sometimes Sundays. There's a few messages that I like to bring and really try to stress. One is that treatment can be successful. So especially here on the west side, a few of you got the news tonight that you definitely have fire ants, and that can be really intimidating and overwhelming right away, right? Like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get hold of this problem? We have been doing this in Puna, in neighborhoods that have been infested for 20 years, and people get their property under control. You can get it down to 0 detections, and you can start to enjoy your outdoors, your backyard again. The key is commitment and perseverance. It's not a one and done. As Kiyoshi said, you have to stick with it. The best situation is if you can work with your neighbors and get a group of people together, get your hui together, and then everybody's working on it at the same time using the same methods, you're gonna have better results. So this is something that we really stress is like, how do I talk to my neighbors? What do I need to do? So we try to work with you on that. And that goal is to get to 0 detections. So yes, it seems like a lot, just, I'm gonna have to treat fire ants for a year. Like a year is a really long time. But then at the end of the year, you don't have to keep using the pesticides, and you don't necessarily have to keep going. Right now, you can get down to monitoring, and you're only maybe creating a border where they're coming in, or you're just treating one area that's still stubborn, but you have a sense of my whole property is at 0 detection, except for here and here, and now you're not putting as much pesticide out in the environment. So this is one of the benefits. The second message is to utilize research-based strategies. And these guys touched on this a little bit, but I spend a lot of time on Facebook. It's not a great place to be. And I see some of the craziest things that people will say of how to get rid of fire ants. And it's amazing to me how many people on Facebook are like, yeah, that sounds great. What? There's websites. Go look it up. Don't trust what people just tell you, and we've heard a lot of really interesting things. Last year, a woman burned down her house in Puna using a blowtorch. So there's a lot of creative ways to kill ants. They're not all advisable, but the best way to do this is with bait. So if you have 30 to 77 queens, you're never going to find them. They're tucked away and hidden. So you need them to work for you. You need those workers to take the bait back to the queens. We have Hawaii Ant Lab here, which is they do work throughout the Pacific. Right, and they're right here on this island. We have the Extension Service, researchers that have years and years of experience doing this. Do not believe what you read on Facebook when we have people who study this for a living. So this is our second message is, hey, there's research to help you with this. You're not alone, and we have proven results. So that's an important piece of it, okay? And then the third piece is that timing. So we really try to stress that timing at every 4 to 6 weeks. Whatever you're using, whatever method you go to, whatever product you choose, you want to stay on that schedule 4 to 6 weeks. That's critical and that's the key. And so we have worked with a lot of neighborhoods, and at the end we say, well, what went right, what went wrong? And people will say, well, I still have ants, but I went away for 2 months. And I never treated. I missed 2 of my treatments. Well, that gave the queens time to build their colony size back up. That time period is really important. So we tell people every 5 weeks, that gives you an extra week in case you get that tropical storm blowing in, or you forget, or you get busy, or something happens. But start your year of treatment by planning. Like put that in your Google Calendar and get those reminders, or write it on the calendar that's in your kitchen or on your wall. Put that down. This is when I'm going to treat for ants. This is the day. Don't just be like, okay, I treated for ants and I'm going to have to remember that in another month and a half. People always fall off, right? It's like going to the gym. Like you have to commit and make that make yourself accountable. So this is another thing that we really try to stress. Okay. When we started this program in 2016, one of the big pieces was talking to people and saying, what do you think the challenges are to your community getting this done and being able to get rid of fire ants? And a lot of times where people told us where neighbors don't care. And I'll tell you a story though. So the very, very first time we did this, right? This is a brand new program. We just launched it, our very first community. It was in Hilo. And everybody's seated in this beautiful carport. And we give the presentation and we said, okay, what do you think? What do you think the challenges are? And one woman just went off. But I'm treating and I'm working so hard and my neighbor's not doing anything and it's not gonna make a difference and blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, okay, it's my first time that we're doing this program. Well, maybe, did you invite her to this meeting? Yeah. And she didn't wanna come? No, she's right there. So, little awkward for me. And, and then the woman got really upset and she said, I drove all the way to Hilo and I went to the Hawaii Ant Lab training and it was, the long course was 6 hours and she had been treating. And they just hadn't talked about it. And so it was like this pilikia between them for no reason. And we've seen that time and time again that people will say, I don't want to talk to my neighbor, or my neighbor's not going to want to do anything about it. We had neighbors in Puna who had TROs against each other, who shook hands and agreed to treat for fire ants. That's how much this is a uniter. So I'm just saying, when people say, okay, I'm afraid to talk to my neighbor, take some of the free stuff you get here tonight, go to your neighbor, and that's how you approach it. Hey, I was at this community forums, they get handing out fire ant stuff. I just thought maybe people in our neighborhood should have it. You don't have to walk up to somebody and say, do you have fire ants? You say, hey, this is a conversation starter, and I want to start this conversation because it is a community problem. So that's been a big piece that, we're trying to provide tools for that. Being unsure of the right treatment approach, that's education, that part's pretty easy. And then empty lots and absentee owners, we talk about that. And then cost. People are intimidated by the cost. If you work with your neighbors and you buy in bulk, you can get this cost down to about $15, $16 an acre per treatment. So it's not that intimidating of a cost. So we give a lot of advice on how communities can sort of pull together and work together on it. Okay, you can go through this fast. Benefits of working together, cost savings, 40% or more reduction in ingredients, getting everybody together to treat, your whole neighborhood rather than you just treating your yard and they're treating their yard and they're treating their yard. If everyone's mixing up all at once, it's time saving. We have seen a lot of neighbors work with each other. Somebody broke their leg, somebody went to the mainland. We had people who had deaths in the family, people who had babies born, and their neighbors helped them out by treating for fire ants to keep them on that 4 to 6 week schedule. So the benefit of working with your neighbors is there's someone else to help you with this problem and help you keep on schedule. And again, accountability. They say, if you're going to the gym, get a gym buddy so that you can wake up at 7, oh, I'm supposed to be at the gym at 7:30. I don't want to go, but I told my friend I'd be there. And so you have accountability to someone else. It's the same thing. You're going to put that on your calendar, you plan to treat for fire ants, and on that day, you're going to get your whole community together, you're going to be more likely to get up and do it. And it's more fun. So when our communities get together, and we didn't make them do this or even suggest it, they started doing it on their own. We have at least 2 communities that do it as a cocktail party. Most get together for breakfast and they'll do breakfast treats and coffee, but it's a way to bring the neighborhood together and everybody gets together and it's like ant treatment day, but it's more fun. And then you really see over the long term, and we've done the studies and we've surveyed people and we've looked at this and this is true, over the long term you have better results if you can get your community together. Okay, so in order to facilitate that, what we've done is that we have a neighborhood HUI program. So to get your community started, if you can get a minimum of 6 neighbors together, I think this comes up, we will come out and do the hands-on training with you and work with your community. And we've done that in 42 neighborhoods so far in the last couple of years, and over 400 people participating. And this is kind of what it looks like. So we get everybody together, we get out in the yard. Oh, there it goes. And wherever it is, whatever your property looks like, we start everybody out doing the 6 months of tango. Tango is really nice if you have people in your area that, or even yourself, if you're a little bit reticent to use a toxicant. It's a nice way to sort of get all the neighbors on the same page. It's easy. Once you mix it up, it's only 5 ingredients. It's not that hard. And everyone can use it. Everyone in the neighborhood can use it. And then at 6 months, we come back and we talk about whether there should be some changes to your plan or not. As you can see, that's what the bait looks like. It's not a aerosol spray, it's a goop. It's like a yogurt. So a lot of times people get afraid, like, oh, so you're spraying in the neighborhood. It's not really spraying, it's more like bleh. So it's a little less intimidating for folks. So if you're talking to your neighbors, they say, oh, I don't want spray. It's more like throwing yogurt in the trees. And this is what it looks like. So this is a dragon fruit leaf. So for people who are asking, you know, saturation, this is just one little line of bait we went over the dragon fruit plant. And then you can see how tiny those ants are coming to that line of bait that came out of a sprayer. So you don't need a lot. They will come and gather around and take what they need. Okay, so that program, if you want to get your neighbors together, if you do have fire ants, requirement of a commitment of 6 properties, roughly in the same area, should be able to walk to each other's houses. And we will give you that personalized plan for the year. And we come out and do that Tango application, and we leave you a kit of stuff so that it's easy. The next time you don't have to go run around shopping for anything. Everything's there. We have a buyer's guide for where you can go to get your pesticides and all your stuff. And then every month you'll get a reminder from our technician. Your whole community that you're working with will get this reminder that says, hey, it's time. Get ready. And anytime you have any questions, you can always call us, and then we'll come back at 6 months to talk about whether we want to go to toxicant or not. And some people might want to do toxicant, some people might want to stay on Tango, that's fine. And then we come back at 12 months to see where you guys are and wrap it up. So it's a full year of hand-holding. And this is where we have communities that either have completed the program or are currently in the program. And so you can see we're all around the island. So there's fire ants everywhere. Okay, so that's me at the top. I'm Franny. This is my team. They aren't here tonight, Jade, Kavehi, and Molly, but they're awesome. If you get to meet them, you'll love them. We're on Facebook and Instagram, and please pick up a sticker or magnet that reminds you that you either check for fire ants 4 times a year, or you're gonna have to treat every 4 to 6 weeks. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Franny. That was awesome and fun and entertaining. So this is a major issue for our community and affects our well-being, our pets, if you're into agriculture, our native ecosystems, our wildlife, and so obviously, and affects our food security as well. And so now we will take time to take questions from the audience. So I think Jane will be collecting some of the cards. But as she's collecting those, I do have a couple questions. We've had a lot of rain lately, and we're predicting the wettest winter I saw a few days ago. Does rain affect your bait stations or colony reemergence?
First off, we want to remember that that we're not putting out bait stations. We want to broadcast these baits. One downfall to those granular, the corn grits that you're spreading on the ground, is that they can get soggy and become unattractive. Whereas the Hawaii Ant Lab gel bait, once mixed up and applied, it only needs, again, 4 to 6 hours of dry weather for the ants to find it. If you have a light rain during that time, it can actually rehydrate the gel. If you do have a heavy rain, it will wash it away, but the best thing is to just get it out there and give it the chance.
Okay. And are these baits specific? You were talking about beneficial insects, so these are specific to the little fire ants, or as far as insect species?
Yes, really target specific for protein and oil loving ants. So it doesn't kill all ants, but it's definitely target specific for those type of ants. Protein and oil loving ants, not going to be attractive to things like honeybees or ladybugs, and our good stuff. So. Okay. Very target specific.
And should we keep these in a hidden place, away from our pets and children?
Don't keep it in your ice box, that's
okay.
for sure. But yeah, the baits that we all are recommending, they're all about 99.4 to 99.6% food. So very low active ingredient. Some of the safest stuff you can use besides being so target specific.
Okay. Personally at home, I use taro for a lot of ant problems.
It's
Won't work
Not
on little
recommended
fire.
for little fire ant.
really for the sugar-loving ants,
Okay.
like a lot of the black ones you see
Okay,
and
so
stuff.
follow your orders specifically,
Yeah, I'll be sure to give you one of my cards.
which is a very good motto for the night. And how should we treat our bites if we get a bite or pets?
Whiskey.
Well, there we
Drinking
go.
off of that, and you just go right to sleep. A lot of people get relief from rubbing alcohol. Hand sanitizer has an alcohol content, and it kind of cakes on there a little bit better. And then a cold compress. But being that it stings, a lot of people react differently. So for me, I just don't scratch it. For my wife, she's yelling at me like I'm the one who stung her and hitting me and things like that.
She brought the stuff home though, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So revenge, but yeah. So a lot of times results with rubbing alcohol or a cold compress, cold shower.
Okay.
That can get you relief. Yes.
And you were talking about our native bird species. They did not adapt in Hawaii to an environment that had ants. So a lot of them are ground dwelling and ground nesting. So I've heard that some of the adult birds that are sitting on eggs or young will just sit there and be stung and stung and stung and sacrifice themselves.
Yeah, that's their behavior, is that they stay on their nest with their young, and so they're not going to abandon their eggs or their babies. So it's a pretty sad situation.
So we have a question here. Can we use both the gel and, I think that says Ambro at the same time?
Amdro.
Yeah, you can use a combination of both. Some people will do gel 1 week and granule the following, all of their non-edible stuff. Personally, I have, knocked it out in the same day. I have to maintain 8 acres in Hakalau. Yeah, you can do both. Keep in mind they can contradict each other, being that the granule will kill. It is a lethal toxicant, where the tango is, a growth regulator. So I'm real specific in keeping my tango in the trees and using the granular baits on my non-edible crop, on my ornamentals, my open areas, rock walls, things like that. So
Okay.
then I'm not kind of, contradicting the effects of both of the baits.
Okay, and then another question along that line, is the gel or granule harmful to dogs?
Some of the most danger that these baits can cause is its oil content. So a mass consumption of it could cause a sore stomach because of the oil content. But like I said, some of the safest stuff you can use. But personally, it's recommended to, keep your dog inside the house or your cat, pen them up for that 4 to 6 hours if you can.
The methoprene, which is the active ingredient in tango, it's actually been used for a really long time as a flea and tick medicine for dogs. So it's really commonly used on pets.
Okay.
So it's not something that is considered to have, through all the testing, any harmful effects.
Well, that's good to know. And what's the best and safest way to get rid of them in the house?
So we don't recommend baiting inside of your home because that would be inviting them inside for a free dinner. What we would recommend is keeping your baits outside of the house. And when they come inside, they're just looking to see if there is any food in there. If they're not finding it and you're giving them the food source outside, then it'll draw them out. And you can choose to put a barrier around the home after that.
All right. And how far up a tree will a little fire ant travel? Does anybody know?
As far as it can get.
As far as it can go, to the top. That's the answer.
Just to add on to that a little bit, the Hawaii Ant Lab's research team is doing some foraging studies. Right now, it's unknown how far they're foraging. It's going to depend on different elements, such as food availability and other things. But ultimately, that's the importance of doing a broadcast of the bait. So you're giving them as many opportunities to find these granulars as quickly as possible while we're having good weather and getting it back to the queen.
And staying along those lines with trees, what is the relationship between little fire ants and the white mealybug or fruit flies?
Want to do that since you talked about them farming?
So one of the impacts, again, for agriculture and even for our plants at home is that the little fire ants will feed off of a sweet honeydew nectar that the aphid, scale, and mealybugs produce. And in turn, the little fire ants are providing protection for these other insects, moving them around as we would cattle, and that's their relationship. And with the increase in that honeydew nectar, there's that secondary impact we talked about, the black sooty mold, and that can damage plants. Other ant species will do this as well.
So me personally, when I have seen mealybugs present on some of my plants that I like, I spray them with water and dish soap and rinse it off. But dish soap would have an oily base, right? Would I just be encouraging more little fire ants, or?
Not necessarily.
No. Okay.
You're at whatever you contact and then you wash it off. You're suffocating, and it's
Okay.
good that you're washing it and flushing it off.
Okay. And sticking with trees, what is the best, how to spray lime trees?
How to spray lime trees? So when applying the gel matrix, you want to stick to the trunks and main lateral branches of the tree. So that's how you're not getting the saturation like we discussed about. You want to do those squirts on the ants take the paths of least resistance. So you're going to get maximum consumption when you stick to the trunks and the main interior lateral branches.
Okay.
Can I just add on that we
Sure.
want to make sure that we're avoiding any flowers, because that's the one time that bees can come in contact with the pesticides. So again, by sticking to the trunk and the main branches, you're not going to be applying to the flowers where the bees can come in, pollinate, get the pesticide, and take it back to the nest.
Okay. And bees are becoming one of our most important friendly insects, so we want to protect those.
Amen.
And are these all one clone? And if so, are they susceptible to genetic management approaches that have been used in other integrated pest management programs?
That question is above my pay grade. Heather will answer this one.
So little fire ants, as we talked about, are native to Central and South America. The ones that we have here are genetically identical to those found in Florida. And yes, they do have what's called clonal reproduction. There's more details about that is then above my pay grade, but the important thing to take home is that there are invasive and non-invasive forms of little fire ants in their native range, and the ants that we have are invasive. So that means that there's multiple queens in a colony, they're all working together. One queen can lay an average of 7 eggs per day.
Now, are there specific mitochondrial Wolbachia for little fire ants, as has been used in other insect populations to introduce an incompatible Wolbachia or to sink the population, or is that not something they know about yet, or
I don't know the answer to that, but I can get back to you after I touch base with the research specialist.
Okay.
It's also important to know that little fire ants aren't considered the worst, right? Like the red imported fire ant, which Heather talked about earlier. And so when you look at the research, there's a lot of research that goes into that ant. And when you have that kind of attention on one species, another species can get less attention. And so we see the same thing with like the products, you know, products for fire ants. Almost always when you're looking at that label, it's referring to that larger ant that's in Texas and Florida and South Carolina, and it's just all across the United States and in other countries, because it's something that is so widespread as such a huge pest. And so a lot of the things that might have been tested on other ant species won't necessarily get that attention and funding for research. So some of the things, there's not as much attention on little fire ant, unfortunately, worldwide.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the best motto for Hawaii is the best ant is a dead ant.
Yeah, I would agree.
Do we have introduced species of ants that are beneficial to certain farmers for plants that have to do with agriculture?
I think of them as benign.
It could be arguable. I mean, ants can be pollinators for certain things, and they do have a purpose in the environment, but
But not here.
they're introduced, so it's really, for us, if someone has an ant sample, if the ants are not little fire ants, we say, are they bothering you? If they're not bothering you, I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay.
But we do, other than little fire ants, we do get other problematic ants, the yellow crazy ants that Franny mentioned, Argentine ants, Singapore ants, the tropical fire ant, which is the stinging ants at a lot of the beach parks that get mistaken for little fire ants.
Okay. Well, in that same line of talking about different species of ants, we have a question. In the last 4 to 5 years, someone has noticed about 5 different types of ants in their house or yard. 1, could this be part of climate change? And 2, what could be causing this to happen, the new ants arriving?
Well, there's new insects arriving all the time. So one of the issues, Hawaii does not have really strong biosecurity. There's an estimate on a study done in 2002, which is still quite a ways back, that we were getting about 1 new insect a day arriving in Hawaii at our ports. Now, not all of those insects will survive, not all of them will reproduce. It's modeled at about 17 new insect species per year coming in to Hawaii. Whether they will be considered invasive, meaning are they going to cause harm in one of those 3 areas, we don't know. And with insects, unfortunately, it's not until they're causing significant harm that they're usually noticed. And at times, and this is what happened with little fire ant, it's already too late by the time we even figure out what to do about them. So I would say if anyone's noticing strange ants, they should probably be talking to Kiyoshi and saying, hey, what are these ants? Because it's entirely possible that of the species we already have here, something new could come in. So it's a concern.
Okay.
I'd also like to add too that it's actually a good sign unless it's a new invasive ant. But when LFA established, they will be the only ant in your yard. They'll take over everybody else, no matter how big and bad.
Despite a social media explosion this past week claiming that the black ants were going to outcompete the...
Genius kind stuff.
It's just not, they do fight, but they don't win. So, yeah.
So the little fire ant colonies they attack the other ant colonies, other
Yes.
ant species
They'll
colonies?
eat them.
Oh, wow.
It's really based on their sheer numbers. So at first, maybe your yard, you may have these 5 species of ants, but when the little fire ants move in, they'll play nice, but eventually they'll literally rip the other ants apart, and you'll be overtaken by the little fire ant. And there are studies that document this in Hawaii. The good news, though, is that once you start doing your treatments, you'll see that the other ants are appearing again.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes people are like, oh, now I got this ant. Well, it's not the little fire ant, so maybe
We
something
actually
to be
had
grateful
somebody, we went back at 6 months, after they treated for 6 months, he said, come here, I have to show you something, and we run, you know, upstairs, and he's got black ants up his kitchen wall, which normally, normally people are like, oh, I have ants, and he's like, look, they're back. So it changes your perspective.
Okay, all right. Well, that's one way to look at it, I guess.
I'd also like to add, personally, I've seen a decline in things like mealybug, for the person with the mealybug question. I've seen a decline in Homoptera on my farm once I started managing LFA.
Does diatomaceous earth affect little fire ants at all? Is that beneficial?
No.
No. All right.
Short and sweet.
Will it make our hair shinier if we?
So just to add on to that, unfortunately with diatomaceous earth, it's really meant for the soft-bodied insects to cut into them. And remember, we're not looking to just kill off the workers, because what happens if you're doing any type of a contact or residual barrier, you're only killing off those workers that are out foraging for food. When they're not bringing food back to the queen, she just kicks out another batch of recruits and ups egg production. So you get this never-ending conveyor belt. So again, baiting is your best bet.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Are you working with homeowner associations and organizations such as Next Door Neighbor, which can run committee information on websites and et cetera?
So we've tried to get on Nextdoor. The problem is when you log in, you can't be outside of the neighborhood to get onto a neighborhood in Nextdoor. So that's been a challenge. But I try to join the neighborhood pages that are on Facebook. And yes, we do work with homeowners associations, and that tends to work really well, I think, to have it.
So
with
maybe if
homeowners
you have a
associations.
community group that already has a Nextdoor, you could get them to do it.
Right, that's what we tried to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there's such a demand for information for little fire ants, I think, I know that Hawaii Ant Lab and probably BIISC as well struggles with trying, you know, we don't have the time to target, say, oh, do you need help? What about you? How about you? It's more like people are coming to us and we're inundated that way. So my recommendation would be to bring your community to us, and we'd be more than happy to help.
Okay, and littlefireants.com
And also.
and the labs
BIISC.org.
Yeah.
and BIISC. And so somebody has a question. It sounds like Tango is not a pesticide. If that's correct, can non-PCOs contact do the same treatment? Okay.
Also, just to add, you know, the baits that we do recommend, you don't have to be licensed to use for your property, for yourself, you know. For personal use, anybody can use the things that we're recommending.
Okay.
Just keep that in mind. We're not teaching you guys about restricted use pesticides.
And if you do want to hire someone, we do, and I'm sure you guys would agree on this, we recommend that you do hire a PCO. So someone who is licensed as a pest control operator. You can call and say, do you do fire ant treatments? There were a number, and there are a number of unlicensed outfits, which is not legal, but it happens. And we've had really mixed reports about that, and I've spent about 3.5 years listening to people talk about that. And in the beginning, I was supportive, and at this point, I think it's better to just go with a pest control operator, just from everything that I've experienced.
So what if you have an organic farm and you have organic certified? Can you use some of these methods, or since they are designated as a pesticide?
So none of them are certified organic, but there is, you can get a suspension for 1 year for that particular piece of the farm to use Tango only. And that is something that they can work with the Organic Farmers Association to get that that exception for that 1 year, and not lose the certification, right? Not have to go through that 5-year process again. But there's also a potential in the future for organic.
Yeah, so with these gel baits that the Hawaii Ant Lab developed, we're now looking into an organic option. So the first step of that is to test the efficacy of the product. And then from there, we still would have to go through all the legal red tape, and that does take time. So, you know, with Tango, Provant, we had to get what's called a special local needs label. Tango has a 2EE. So it is definitely on our list of important things to do because organic farmers are being impacted.
Okay.
And there is work being done, so, you know, keep in touch with us if you guys have questions about those things, you know, contact us, see our progress, you know, stay updated.
Yeah, because it sounds like things are changing
Yep.
and you all the time, and you guys are improving all the time. So, I have a question here about green waste treatment. How to dispose of infested waste?
It's a good question, you know, really good question. That's how it, you know, a lot of this stuff spreads is in green waste. You can actually do a combination of things with the barrier treatment, like I talked about, that lethal electric fence. That can actually be your dump site surrounded, you know, with a barrier treatment. And then what people will do is black tarp it out in the sun. Everything underneath that black tarp will cook. Anything that tries to run away hits that barrier and holy maka flip, yeah.
Okay.
Just adding on to that, I'm not sure if the question was more, you know, is it okay to take your green waste to the facility? Was that your question in the back?
No, you mentioned black tarp. Do ants survive under the black tarp?
If it heats up hot enough, you know, it won't survive. And that's why it's recommended to keep it in an open area where the sun can really heat it up. Yeah.
I would recommend, rather than getting specifications from us, is to look how to do hot composting online. There's a lot of information out there. So hot composting and raising the temperature up to, I believe it's 150, 160 degrees for a sustained amount of time throughout the pile will kill the ants. The other option is if you're not trying to mulch it on your own property, taking it to the green waste facility is okay, because what they're doing is properly mulching and composting this green waste to prevent the spread of little fire ants, rapid ohia death, other invasives as well.
So I had another question here is, are you guys working with local companies like Home Depot and Lowe's and places like that? Do they make sure that they are following that 4 to 6 week?
I've
What
done.
was the question though?
Oh.
Home Depot, Lowe's, the different places like that.
But
Are
you said
guys-
to make sure they're following the 4
Well,
to
I
6
wonder if you're working with them on a treatment plan, or whether they test, or whether they screen
for their facility.
Yeah.
Action.
for little fire ants.
I cannot, did you want to?
The plants in the
Yeah, so,
horticulture.
so a lot of the prevention starts with the nursery before it ends up at a place like Home Depot or Ace Hardware. The work will go to the nurseries, whether it be Department of Agriculture, visits by us,
Okay.
education. So it's more targeted towards the nursery than the actual big box store.
We do have a program. It's a nursery endorsement program called Plant Pono, and it's to encourage nurseries to not sell invasive plants. It's still legal to sell invasive plants in Hawaii. So nurseries sign up for the program, and part of the program is that they agree to use best management practices for koki and little fire ant. Now,
okay.
you can't, that's not a guarantee that if you buy from a Plant Pono nursery that it won't have koki or little fire ant, because things can change from day to day, right?
Yeah.
So we go out there and we test once a year, but something could happen a couple months later. But the nursery does agree to use best management practices for those pests, and we do check in with them from time to time, and they know that they can reach out if they do end up with a fire ant problem or a koki problem and ask for help.
Okay, perfect. And just
Plantpono.org.
plantpono.org.
Plug for our website.
Look for and look.
They make sure whoever you hire that you're watching what they're doing, because they came and I was there and they sprayed the toxic chemical on my vegetables. So not good.
You know, and
So watch them.
I definitely heard a couple years ago that the on the west side there was the wisdom amongst a certain group of landscapers was to use the barrier treatment like Tall Star, Home Defense, and to spray it all over the vegetation. Yeah, so you know this, and this was really upsetting. And I actually had somebody in the community say, well, you know, the landscapers know what they're doing. I said, well, they know what they're doing because, you know, you have snowbirds coming, they don't want to see a creepy crawly, and they're killing everything because those barrier treatments are rated to treat 75 plus insects. And so if you take that barrier and you spray it all over your vegetation, you won't see an insect. Great, but you're not getting the queens, and you're killing all these other insects that are going to land. And so that there does, you know, it is something to be really conscious of, because I think that there is an impression, if I just get rid of everything, the owners will be happy. And a lot of times people who don't, you know, aren't really paying attention, oh, I don't see any bugs, it must be working. But yeah, knowing your pesticides is kind of important.
I have one more question over here.
How long does the gel last once you mix it?
Great question. That's a great question. Has a shelf life about maybe 24 to 36 hours once mixed. But please don't store it in the ice box, you know, thinking that it's gonna, you know, some people are doing that, you know, right next to the eggs and the bacon. So, but yeah, once mixed, about 24 to 36 hours. And that's keeping it in a cool, dry place, you know, not out in the middle of the drive, out in the sun. I always say, if you're planning on treating with gel, you mix and then use it, you know. I have done large treatments to where we mix the afternoon before. And possibly, you know, we start out early in the morning. Sometimes we have to re-agitate a little bit. You'll see a little bit of separation with the water and the oil. But that's a really great question. Thank you.
Why don't you tell us what's in that gel bait?
In the gel bait is a mixture of water, smooth peanut butter or beef liver powder, vegetable or corn oil, xanthan gum, and then your active ingredient, which we talked about, would be tango. So about 5 ingredients mixed in certain ratios can bring you that consistency of that yogurt, ketchup, you know, bait that you can squirt in your trees. So 5 ingredients mixed together in the right ratios, in the right order, can make your gel matrix.
What the heck is xanthan gum?
Is he getting tested?
Yeah, so xanthan gum is a food product. Helps the water and the oil combine. And baking oil. You know, you can order it too. You know, it's a food ingredient. Kind of acts similar to like a cornstarch if you're making a roux or something for your beef stew like that.
She used to like gluten-free baking.
I
So
don't
if
know
you're
what gluten
gluten-free,
is, but,
if you're a
you know.
gluten-free baker, you might have xanthan gum in your cabinet.
But yeah, xanthan gum. Yeah, we can help you out. And who might provide xanthan gum, Heather?
You can reference our fact sheet, the Hawaii Ant Lab fact sheet number 8.
Oh, she's quizzing you.
Yeah.
I just
I'm all
want
sweaty again. I just finished sweating when I was presenting, and then I get a quiz, I get all sweaty again.
just trying to get the facts out there.
That's right.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And so, do we have any other questions out there? Oh my gosh, we do have. Okay.
Do you use tango only on fruit trees and edibles, or also on grass and bushes?
Let Franny do this one.
Yeah, we have people use it everywhere. With grass, we don't tend to find that they're nesting there. They could be foraging through there. So we tend to focus on the vegetation, getting on, as Kiyoshi pointed out, the trunk and those lateral branches. You know, we want to focus on that, focus on the vegetation. That's where you're going to find the ants. But tango is really nice in that it's a product that can be applied pretty liberally, just not near streams, not near water or you know, high tide. So it's pretty versatile.
And make sure that if you are using tango only, which is a totally acceptable option, that you're getting full coverage on everything. but maybe applying a higher rate on that dense vegetation.
Question about really tall trees. I've got plenty that are 20, 30, 40, 50, giant mango, maybe 80, 100 feet high. I know the mango has fire ants in it. What's the realities of this? From what I gather, I can shoot the stuff as far as I can with a sprayer. I'm not going to get a helicopter to drop. So is the reality that I'm always going to have the colonies up there and it's going to be just a guarantee containment around all of these tall trees, even if I'm religious about doing what you suggested within the range of the handheld spray system?
Quite possibly. So a lot of times with these older mango trees or these really huge, just monsters of trees, they have a lot of other vines growing on them, which creates great habitat. With the backpack sprayer, you can get a good 20, 30 feet up, and you just have to hope that the ants will meet you halfway. But if it's safe, you can get on a ladder or the back of a truck. But treating that as a hot spot for the long term and knowing that it's going to be a continued problem.
I have seen people get creative and put gel on the end of a long bamboo and treat the trunks like with almost like a paintbrush method. If you like save your big mango tree like that.
I was just wondering if we can't use drones for the tops of the trees.
Mm-hmm. It's something that has been looked into, but again, the products that we have available to us, the label would have to state that they're allowed for aerial application. So that's kind of a hang up on a lot of things. But we are working with the university in that technology.
All right, well, this has been really great. This is one of the best forums we've had for a long time, and thank you guys so much for coming. Everybody had so amazing questions, and you guys are so well informed. Did a great job of presenting. Again, we have these great magnets in the back. Pick one up, and keychains. This is the size of your little fire ants. And if you want to pick up brochures and testing kits, please. And some people did bring their ants to Kiyoshi for him to check. And thank you so much. And on the behalf of Community Forums, thank you for coming. And if you liked this, go back, please provide us some feedback. And remember that we are a community organization that is donation-based, so we are always needing funding. So if you have a chance before Christmas, donate to Community Forums. All right.
And how about a big hand to our moderator, Miss Candee Ellsworth. And if we learned a lot today, let's please give a really round of applause to our speakers, Heather, Kiyoshi, and Franny. What a fantastic presentation they gave. I saw some people with little ant samples and things like that, so they will be around to accept them.
This is the representation of the kind of quality of speakers that we have here at West Hawaii Forum. And we put these monthly forums on to provide as much civic involvement and education on issues that are important to you, the community. We are one island, we are one community.